Welcome to Tambay, the Vodcast, Episode 2.
What setbacks have you had in your life? In this episode, we'll listen to 3 young adults on how they dealt with unexpected and less than ideal life situations. Tara! Tambay muna tayo!
Hi, I'm Ayen Dela Torre. I actually don't know what I do anymore, but if my work defines who I am, I'm a community builder at Where to Next, and I'm also a facilitator.
Hello everyone, I'm RJ. I'm a medical doctor and nurse by profession, but right now I'm studying community development and I lead the Akbayan Youth and the Youth for Mental Health Coalition.
Hello everyone, I am Mhey with an H. I am your mindful financial coach and I am a content creator.
I love that you said with an H because people always misspell. And now that we're in a cafe, and I actually super miss this nung dati, the pandemic, we're just in video and now in person. Since we have drinks, if your current mood was a drink, what drink would that be? Hirap
ba ako? Yun yung unang tanong. Sige, tingin ko mocktail.
Wow.
Mocktail.
General.
Baka may specific na ano.
And then general tayo dito.
Okay, why mocktail?
Mocktail kasi, parang may fun side siya. Pero hindi siya sobrang fun na, alam mo yun, mawawala ka na sa sarili mo. Yung gano'n.
Yes.
Grounded pa rin, gano'n.
What about you?
Ako siguro Americano. Hindi dahil sa bitter siya, pero rin it gets the work done, di ba? It gets the work done kasi yun yung kailangan natin to work and move forward.
Amen.
I think ako lemonade, refreshing for the summer, kahit di na summer. Pero minsan maasim din. Wala akong tulog, tas sobrang traffic. So, it depends. It depends on the mood. So, sobrang simple icebreaker lang. But I think the theme talaga of our vodcast is how to handle and bounce back from setbacks. So, ito na yung medyo deep conversation. So, I think my first question is, ano yung thresholds nyo when it comes to considering a life event as a setback? Like, how bad should it be for you to say, like, oh my gosh, I'm rattled by this event?
Ako siguro pag pag ginawa mo na lahat tapos hindi mo pa rin nakuha yung outcome na gusto mo. So, doon ako talaga nasa-stress pag pinag-usapan natin yung setback. And pag impact ng setback na yun will have a long-term implication sa future or sa mga kasama mo in your community. So, yeah.
Love it. Very academic.
Copy-paste, char.
May with an H.
May with an H. Ako, I agree with what you said. No? Parang kapag nag-full out na you did everything, I did everything I could, pero parang hindi ko pa rin nakukuha yung results na yun. That's one. And then pangalawa, I know that sometimes madali kasi akong maapektuhan emotionally. So, minsan, yung noise talaga, na parang feeling ko, sobrang nakaka-apekto na siya sa akin if I'm paralyzed by the situation.
Yeah.
Na sobrang clouded na ng thoughts ko and I'm not able to move forward and shift in a different or be in a different state. I think that's what I consider as a setback.
I think what I noticed as a common thread between your answers, and medyo copycat answer ko din, I feel like it's the loss of control. Like you don't have the agency to make that change no matter how gung-ho you are about it. Hindi talaga kaya. So I think that's the common definition for us in terms of setback. So speaking of setback, medyo kwentuhan na, medyo maala-ala mo kaya level. Walang iyak. Pwede rin naman, tears are welcome. Okay. What are some of your setbacks or experiences in failing when it comes to your personal lives?
I think makaka-relate dito yung mga students na magta-transition sa world of work. Though may work involved, it's very personal kasi ako, yung course ko in college, I love adver. Okay? I fell in love with my course and everything. Nakita ko na sarili ko nasa advertising industry. Ganyan. Kaso, nung nag-work ako, 3 months in, I quit.
Oh, wow.
Tapos, kasi hindi ko na handle yung pressure and yung toxicity. Hindi ko siya na-handle. Tapos, may mga voices in my head. Yung mga nag-e-echo na boses ng prof ko saying na, if you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen. Yung mga ganon. Tapos,
Gordon Ramsay level.
parang cutthroat industry, ganyan. Sabi ko, shocks, ang weak ko ba? Hindi ba talaga ako fit for this industry? Ganyan. Parang napanghinaan ako ng loob kasi parang nayurakan yung pagkatao ko sa mga na-receive kong messages noon. Mabigat siya. And knowing na hindi pa ako ganun ka, I think my adversity quotient is not that high at the moment na I can't shift after ko ma-receive yung mga ganong feedback. So, that's a setback for me, but it's actually my saving grace din. Kasi that led me to the organization where I am at right now, which introduced me to life coaching, transformation, and healing. So a lot of healing happened in the past 2 years. So though it's a setback, I feel that, yes, I may have failed some advertising dream ko, di ba? Baka kasi meant in front of the camera. Wow!
Which is
Hindi pala ako sa hindi pala sa backstage, ganon.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's my saving grace.
I love that. Parang setback, but it's actually a redirection.
Yeah.
Perhaps you were just not in that right place to actually thrive. And now, look at you.
Ito na, living the dream.
How about you, RJ?
Ako, kasi sa buhay natin, parang ang dami nating identities na ini-imbibe, right? So, tayo, aside from our work, nandoon pa yung pagiging anak mo, pagiging jowa mo, di ba? Minsan, yun rin yung mga things na
Sana all daw.
Hindi, wala akong jowa ngayon. Pero, di ba, yung binabalance mo yung iba't ibang roles na yan. And doon sa kagustuhan mong maging maayos na worker or employee, di ba? Minsan, nakakaligtaan mo yung mga personal relationships.
Yes.
So, doon ako nag-fail at one point in my life as an advocate and as an activist. Parang mas finokus ko talaga yung work talaga, tapos nakalimutan ko yung personal life ko. So, syempre, kasama dyan yung pag-let go of some relationships, kasama dyan yung spending less time with the family, na minsan nagtatampo na yung nanay ko na, hindi ka sumama dun sa ganitong trip. Tapos every time, binibring up nila yon from time to time. So, hindi naman sa gini-guilt trip nila ako or something, pero recognition na kailangan balansehin natin yung iba't ibang identities that we put on the table.
But how do we balance?
Diba? Especially in this
That is the
situation.
question.
Diba?
Yeah. Agree. I feel like it's the same for me. Parang makarelate ako both sa sinabi ni Mhey and RJ na there was a time in my life I thought ito na yung career na gusto ko. Like I had good compensation, amazing batchmates, mentors, parang lahat ng tao, go, kaya mo to. But then I was actually unhappy and I decided to quit. Even though everyone was like thinking, like, why would you quit such a great opportunity? And then I realized it was because I couldn't find my purpose there. Like maybe externally it's rewarding. There's certain roles that are given to us and it feels like it's such an honor to do this role. Pero if may misalignment with your purpose, then it's really not for you. So, ayun, kaya sabi ko kanina may existential crisis ako. Kung ano, kasi sobrang dami na. I became an HR professional, media person also, a teacher, an NGO worker, and now entrepreneur. So parang, but I feel like all those roles and all those, even the personal roles that we have, they kind of add up lessons that you can use for the next chapter.
Yeah.
And speaking of work, since medyo umabot na rin sa work, ano naman yung mga work experiences where you feel like medyo considered din siya as a setback for you?
Siguro sa akin yung recent elections, kasi I ran for elections under our party. So I was a nominee ng Akbayan at that time. And nakakalungkot kasi hindi lang yung loss ninyo as party, but yung loss ng iba't iba pang mga pro-democratic forces. So yun yung nakakalungkot na parang it was a collective effort kasi na ang daming kumilos, tapos nakita mo yung effort talaga ng mga tao during the campaign. So yun yung mabigat na loss kasi hindi lang siya sa'yo personally, but you're so connected with the entire ecosystem na yun nga, pero hindi naging as planned yung outcome. So it's something that we need to accept. And siguro while doing the campaign, yung painful thing siguro kasi doon is that in the course of campaigning, nahanap natin ulit yung pagmamahal sa bayan. So, sobrang cheesy, alam ko. Pero, di ba, parang nakita natin yung potential natin as Filipinos.
Yes.
Pero, yun, hindi naging as planned or as expected yung outcome.
Okay. Sa'yo medyo, patriotic.
Okay lang naman kayo, hindi naman masyado makabayan.
Punta tayo sa sales. Hindi, sa industry kasi, since I'm in the sales industry, of course, it's numbers. And may time na parang ini-equate ko yung value dun sa sales, syempre, sa numbers na sineset ng mga tao. Tapos pag di siya nami-meet, may parang kine-question ko ulit. Ang dami ko palang kine-question sa sarili ko sa mga pangyayari sa akin. So, na-question ko kung, am I worthy to take up the space? Dapat ba nandito ako? Ganyan. Pero, just wanna insert lang din na I realize that more than the numbers, kasi that's very external, I started looking at my ROS. So that's the rate of self-evolution.
Papa notes mo.
ROS. So rate of self-evolution na, okay, I'm just gonna learn from this. Kasi sabi mo kanina, di ba, na yung...
Every chapter.
Every chapter. Kasi there's this quote from Wayne Dyer. Sabi niya na, there are decisions that we've made in the past that made us who we are right now. And kung titingnan natin na yung mga decisions na yun is something that we were gonna regret.
Yeah.
Instead of regretting it, dapat let's just extract what can we learn from it now. So rate of self-evolution, para rin hindi masyadong not too hard on myself.
Yeah.
Yung ganun. Pero yun, in terms of setback, just the numbers, very external.
I think it's human nature, though, that you equate your worth based on the numbers, based on the achievements that you're able to gain or achieve. Achievements that you're able to achieve, redundant. But I think it takes a lot of courage and introspection to see that your worth as a person is not attached to your work or to your achievements. It could actually be based on the progress or growth that you have as a person, even though you haven't really achieved the certain milestone that you were expecting yourself to do. So for me, at work, we really had to pivot because of the pandemic. Isang malaking setback siya for the entire world. And so if you are a travel community and no one can travel, how are we able to sell and continue our business? So doon kami napaisip na parang, we can actually apply for grants, we can do online workshops, and we can still create that sense of community even though people are far apart. So it's been an interesting challenge, though mahirap, especially kapag yung bills are piling up and you're trying to sort of reinvent yourself, figure out all this like machines and microphone. But yeah, it's an interesting thing. As you mentioned, sometimes it's a redirection rather than an entire setback that puts you in a standstill. So speaking of we've been talking a lot about our setbacks. I think I want to pivot naman on how we approach those setbacks. So can you tell me how you handle your personal, does it different from how you handle your setbacks at work?
Well, personally, I believe that how you are in one thing is how you are in everything. So whatever is showing up in my personal life, for sure, may patterns din na mag-show up sa work. And how I manage or paano ko ginagawa yung mga ina-approach yung setbacks. Number one, awareness. Awareness and acknowledgement of what's real at the moment. And hindi kailangan na masaya yung bagay, yun lang yung i-acknowledge ko. Sometimes, yung mga triggers, yun yung pinakamaganda, that's the golden opportunity for growth eh. So, yun, awareness, acknowledgement, and then, of course, responsibility. And then, now that I'm aware of what's not working, what's not serving me, how can I shift and what are the actions I need to take responsibility of my life. Kasi I'm not gonna play the victim card, di ba? Na hindi ko lang siya panghahawakan. Hindi po victim ako sad. Ganyan. Umaalis talaga sa sad girl face. Ganyan. And looking at things or looking at ways on how I can improve my situation right now. Kasi I don't wanna be stuck there. So, acknowledgement and responsibility.
I love it. May framework.
Yes,
RJ.
Very structured.
No, it's good.
Sa akin, medyo magkaiba kasi yung paningin ko with regard to personal at saka yung mga work-related na mga setbacks. No? Kasi pag personal, parang usually it's more emotionally charged. Tapos parang, at the same time, mas less complex siya i-address. No? Kasi pag nasa workplace, parang ang dami mong kailangan kausapin. You need to get and build consensus from the group that you're working with. Yung pag-diagnose pa lang ng problem, di ba?
Yeah.
Very doctor yan. Pero yung pag-diagnose pa lang ng problem, di ba? Yung making sense of the problem, isang malaking problem na siya. So, tingin ko parang, definitely, yung mga work-related, kailangan mo ng support from other people.
Yeah.
And I think doon rin dapat mag-recalibrate ka. Ano ba yung mga bagay na responsible ako? Ano yung mga bagay na kaya kong i-influence? Kasi minsan we end up frustrating ourselves doon sa gusto nating i-address lahat ng problema all at the same time. So pag ganun, parang pag na-frustrate ka doon, minsan parang nakakabagal rin siya doon sa pag-move forward mo.
Yeah.
So parang nung elections, parang for me, very crucial talaga yung timing kung kailan ka mag-move forward. Kasi definitely, we need to acknowledge nga yung feelings natin. We need to provide some space for it. Pero hindi ka pwedeng ma-stuck doon sa ganong klaseng thinking. No? Yung sinasabi mo na kanina na parang pa-victim card na magiging helpless na lang tayo. So, tingin ko crucial rin kung kailan natin i-open up yung conversation na, okay, kailangan natin magplano about things. Kasi ako, tingin ko talaga yung pag-move forward, kailangan strategic ka rin in terms of how you do it. So, at hindi siya pwedeng sabay-sabay all the time.
If there was a drug to just solve everyone's problems, diba? That drug would fly. Pero yun nga, there's no like one fits all solution. And I like what you mentioned na you acknowledge that this is happening. If you have to move, eat ice cream, watch a lot of shows, wallow, and like do some self-pity, okay lang. But not to the point that it's debilitating you to actually take control of what is happening. And I also like what you mentioned na sometimes it means na hindi lang ikaw eh. Sometimes it also means you have to ask for help. Or else, parang if it's all on you, baka hindi naman talaga kaya ng isang tao. Sometimes it takes a village in order for you to be able to overcome this setback.
Tsaka yung readiness rin ng mga tao around you, di ba? Kasi pag ikaw lang yung nagpo-push nung mag-move forward na tayo, parang ma-frustrate ka lang din along the process. So, very important yung buy-in talaga ng ibang people.
Can I just add to what he said about asking for support? Kasi we just had this activity and then parang ang daming insights na they were all afraid to, or most of us were afraid to raise our hands to ask for help. And ang ganda lang ng pagkakasabi na minsan you just really have to raise your hand so that people can see na kailangan mo na ng tulong.
Yeah.
Kasi sa atin parang most of the time kinikim-kim na lang, ganyan. Pero we'll be surprised that if we just raise our hands, people or the universe will send lots of kung sino man yung force niya para tulungan ka. Kaya, ayun, I think it goes hand in hand with being vulnerable as well.
Yeah.
Yung pag-ask ng support, yun. Just letting go of the pride, the ego, and acknowledging na I'm not alone in this journey.
Yeah.
So I think it really matters kung sino yung nag-open ng ganong kind of spaces. Like for
Yeah,
example, sa mga leaders, sa mga owners ng mga companies, I think it's important na recognize natin na meron din tayong human side na kailangan i-recognize. Kasi minsan yung mga work-related and personal problems, they intertwine. Tapos manifest sila sa workplace or in other fields na kinikilusan natin.
Maybe like because we strive for perfection, both in our personal and our work life, we actually end up failing because it's not something you can achieve. But I was thinking when you mentioned that look for the helpers because then the universe will bring those resources to you. Sometimes I feel like when they see someone raise their hand, they realize that it's not them lang pala who are going through the same thing. Like you as someone who is being helped could actually also help other people along the way. And it's like this beautiful cycle of helping rather than isolating and just doing this on your own and ended up, being disappointed or failing yourself.
Yeah, and as a form of your contribution, we also have to keep an eye out for those people who are raising their hands para in return tayo din makapag-add value rin sa kanila.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I love it. So many nuggets of wisdom. I think more pa, like maybe I'd like to sort of flip it. What are some of the strategies that you tried before that did not work? Like akala mo, this is it. This is the hack. This is my way forward. Pero it didn't happen.
Wallow, joke.
Tama.
Ano ba? Kasi ngayon, I really love structure. But one thing that really didn't work is striving for perfection. Yun talaga. Instead of it being an empowering belief, nagiging limiting belief siya eh. Na parang kailangan at a certain time, ito yung setup, everything, perfect lahat, ganyan. So, hindi siya nag-work. So, mas lalo pang one step back pa ng one step back. So, I think yung mindset na it has to be perfect the first time around. Yun talaga. Kasi hindi talaga siya nag-work. So, wag na gawin yan. Wag na talaga. Let's just keep the needle moving forward. And sabi mo nga kanina, diba, fall in love with the process. Kasi that's when we get to have feedback na what could work better, mga ganon. And hindi natin mamamalaya na doon na pala tayo sa gusto natin. So, one thing that's not serving me is perfection, striving for perfection.
Ako parang yung overemphasis dun sa analyzing the problem. Di ba?
As an analyst.
Relate. As an overthinker.
Di ba? Kahit nung elections, parang after the elections, parang, of course, highly emotional yung mga tao, maraming umiiyak. And it's understandable kasi nakaka-frustrate talaga siya. Pero pag paulit-ulit na yung emotional debriefing ninyo, parang medyo habang umattend ka ng mga debriefing, mas bumibigat yung feeling. So ako parang, yung isa sa mga gusto ko rin talaga i-advocate is, of course, we have to understand the problem, but we have to plan as well, no? Kung ano yung gagawin natin moving forward. So, kumbaga, dapat yung mga problema binubuksan natin, may way na maisara sila dun sa conversation na sinastart natin.
I feel like the common thread again is like when we dwell, whether we dwell on this is not perfect. This could be more ideal. Or what if I did this? Baka the scenario would be more favorable to me. I think there's no point, di ba? Pero it's human nature to think like, baka may onting push ba? Baka mali lang yung timing. Baka we can do it again. Which I think is good. But if we dwell so much on what could be, parang we fail to realize that what is now could actually be where we should be.
Yes.
Like where we are now is, I'm not fatalistic in the sense that parang, this is where I'm meant to be. I am meant to struggle.
Parang kanta yan.
I can be a songwriter in my next career. Pero I feel like there's something that this place or this state of yours is bound to teach you. And if you're not open to that lesson, then it will never be something you can grow from and learn from. So, something for us to think about.
Surrendering to what is.
Yes.
It is what it is.
Yeah, so maybe to flip the question, ano pa yung mga strategies that actually work for you? So apart from acknowledging that there's a setback, gearing yourself towards responding to that setback, any other like pep talk or like shift in mindset that actually helped you overcome your past setbacks in life?
Feeling ko dapat parang ma-recognize natin na hindi pwede maging pattern ito. Kasi parang minsan pag, nakulong tayo dun sa pattern na parang we tend to blame ourselves, na every time na magkakaroon ng problem, ganito yung magiging outcome. So, nakakulong ka na doon eh. So, I think you have to have conversations with other people kasi hindi lang naman isang way yung looking at the problem, di ba? Maraming mga iba't ibang mga versions of the story that you can pick up on. And sometimes, yung hope, minsan nakukuha mo talaga dun sa mga nakakausap mo.
Yes.
Especially, after the elections, parang akala mo at the national level, sobrang down talaga ng mga tao. But when you go to the communities, meron pa rin mga, tuloy pa rin yung kanilang, kanilang gathering, yung mga efforts nila. So, tingin ko yun yung mga, parang, saan ba tayo babaling? Ano ba yung pagkukuhan natin ng hope? So, in those moments na sobrang walang-wala, very important saan ka titingin.
I love it.
Love it. Ako naman, structure. Lagyan ulit natin ng structure. As an analyst, kailangan ko ng structure sa buhay kasi yun yung makakatulong sa akin. And I want to share my practice, my daily routine that can really help me. Diba, I've mentioned adversity quotient earlier. Yun talaga yung nakakatulong sa emotional quotient, sa adversity quotient ko. Number 1 is plugging into my source. First thing in the morning. So really meditating for an hour. And then I have to make sure that I move my body. Stretching lang yan or any physical workout, walking. At least I give my body some love, self-love. And then the third one is growing myself through learning materials. So mga personal dev. So I listen to materials, siguro mga 1 hour yon or less. Tapos, everyday ko siya pinapakinggan. Same material lang. Para mag-permeate siya sa utak ko. Tapos, parang ako na rin yung nagde-deliver ng speech nung sa material na yun. So, it has helped me to be more self-aware and be mindful din sa mga situations ko. Kasi I think, it has been helping me be centered.
Yeah.
Be centered in a way now when there's so much noise outside. I have inner peace na hindi ako basta, alam mo yun, hindi ako basta mapipitik nung circumstance na yun.
Yeah.
So, just really grounding myself and kasi that sets up my day to win. Na hindi ako simpleng matabig lang ako, irritable na ako. May mga ganun pagka hindi nakapag-meditate or hindi nakapag-ground. So, yun yung pinaka nag-work talaga sa akin.
Yeah.
Being rooted first thing in the morning.
As a morning person.
As a morning
Ako
person.
siguro being rooted at 2 a.m. But I think a common misconception about meditation or like all this grounding exercises, it will lead to this, euphoria state na absence of noise. But I think based on what I've read and also based on what I've practiced, that it's not the absence of noise. It's knowing that the noise exists,
Yes.
but it is only passing through. It does not have to consume you. These thoughts, these feelings, they don't have to be your end state. Baka ito lang talaga yung pinagdadaanan mo, but you can still ground yourself to what you believe in.
Yeah.
Very, very, very helpful yung gano'n. Yung mindfulness as a concept. Kasi parang when we're so mindless about going about our day, parang minsan nakakadagdag pa yung response natin dun sa initial problem na gusto natin. So, of course, as much as possible, gusto natin i-limit na. So, during the height of my emotions, hindi talaga ako nag-engage with the problem muna. So, dun pumapasok yung timing kung kailan mo haharapin yung problema mo. Kasi hindi naman lahat kaya mong harapin all the time.
I just want to point out what you said, no? Kasi I love the term you used, yung responding. Kasi dalawa lang yung nagiging outcome. It's either people react to things or we respond to things. And usually kapag reaction, yun yung parang violent agad, yun yung medyo low energy or negative energy.
Yeah.
Pero if we take a step back and then hindi naman kailangan rush yung mga decisions or even the response. So, I think that's one thing that people should be more mindful of. Paano sila nag-respond to a certain person, a certain situation. Hinighlight yung person kasi syempre merong mga prof, merong mga bosses, yung mga ganyan. How do we keep our calm or how do we keep our cool, 'di ba? Sa mga situations na yun. So, reacting and responding.
Yeah.
I just loved it.
And I heard nga parang when you think of response, it doesn't have to be this revolutionary behavior. Parang there's this simple framework na this is the problem and this is the behavior or like how the thing that you do. So if there's no gap, then that's reaction na kaagad. But if this is the problem, then there's a pause, then it's the response. That's pretty much it. Like you just have to respond and you just have to pause and reflect first. Like how do I handle the situation? And that can make a huge difference in the impact or like the consequence of that action. And speaking of action, so apart from approaching, embracing setbacks, seeing them as redirection, not dwelling on the problem, summary, Professor, how do we actually move or gear ourselves towards action? Because we don't want it to be like, okay, we just, dwell or reflect on this, add some framework, pero that's it. Obviously, we want to have action. So how do we make sure that despite all the setbacks, we still move ourselves towards that? How do you motivate yourself to find that action in you to overcome that setback?
Ako yung isa sa mga realization ko about motivation is that hindi natin siya kailangan hintayin before you start doing something. And actually, yung motivation, yung action actually comes from yung motivation comes from your action mismo. So yung power of small actions, napaka-importante nun. Kahit na hindi mo pa feel gawin yung bagay, parang wala kasi tayong choice. The world will continue to move forward, di ba? I mean, di ba? Real talk lang.
Yeah.
Diba? Magkaka-problema, tapos dadami pa yung problema. So unless we actually be proactive about the situation, parang parang mag-flow naturally yung mundo.
Yeah.
So, ako, I always emphasize yung importance of small action. Kasi akala natin minsan na yung motivation comes from external sources. Pero tingin ko yung motivation comes from our small actions talaga. So, kahit na hindi mo pa feel gawin yung isang bagay, kahit na parang tinatamad ka pa, feeling mo hindi pa siya ideal situation. Kasi minsan we keep on waiting for the ideal situation before we start acting. Pero hindi naman ibibigay sa'yo ng mundo yung perfect na situation. So, tingin ko parang it's us taking ownership doon sa situation natin and start doing small thing and hopefully it builds momentum later on.
Yeah, the power of small steps.
Yes.
How about you, Mhey?
Syempre, baon na naman ako.
Syempre, bawal framework.
No, it's really framework talaga eh. So, I want to share the 5 C's. The first one is
5
clarity. Yeah, the clarity, what's your intention? Why you want to do this? Why do you want to move forward? Kasi if it's just shallow na, wala lang, ayoko lang, for sure, you won't get even the motivation to push forward. So, clarity, ano bang gusto ko makuha? And intention is, what do you want to get out of this? Diba? What do you want to get out of this action? Okay, and then the next one is congruence. Congruence is just letting go of things like thoughts and thoughts sa utak natin and also yung mga baggages natin. Imagine, di ba, nasa travel ka.
Yeah.
And kapag nagta-travel ka, masyadong mabigat yung bagahe mo, hindi madaling umusad. So, similar with life. If we are carrying too much baggages, then mas mahirap maggawa ng course of action.
Yeah.
And then the third one is competence. So, it's you, again, growing yourself sa anong field mo man yan. Para kapag ka tinanong ka about it or someone ask you to share something about it, alam mo na kaya mong ibigay yung sarili mo, may ibubuga ka or meron kang ilalabas. And then the next one is character of integrity. Okay, I think this one is very important because yes, you will be setting up your structure, you will be setting up your actions, but if no one's watching, ginagawa mo pa rin ba siya? Yun talaga yun. And yeah, yun. 5 C's ba yun? Feeling ko 4 lang yun.
Clarity.
Okay, clarity, congruence, competence,
and
character of integrity. Nakalimutan ko yung isang C. Pero basically yun talaga yung I live by. So I set the structure and then may mga actions, daily activities for that. But for it to be more, parang mas malalim siya, I anchor it on values. So for example, I want to practice integrity. Meaning kahit isang buong araw walang tao, gagawin ko talaga siya.
Yeah.
Yung mga ganun. Kasi I think it's just more kapag ganun yung ginagawa natin. Yun.
Ako dagdagan ko ng 1A.
4 C's and an A. Bagong framework, guys.
Pero related din siya dun sa point niya kanina, which is accountability body. No?
Yes!
Kasi, minsan kasi...
Or community para
community,
C.
ayun, community na lang.
para C.
I changed my mind. Community na. So, dun sa community kasi minsan, ang dali kasi pag ang dali na hindi mo sundan yung mga pinangako mo sa sarili mo,
Yes.
di ba? Like, for example, yung mga New Year's resolutions natin, di ba, after a few days, dahil very personal siya sa atin, hindi natin siya sinishare sa iba, madali siyang i-let go, madali siyang hindi sundan.
Yeah.
Pero pag kunwari merong someone who keeps you accountable, and someone who feedbacks dun sa, kanina, napag-usapan natin yung how we respond to things. So kung meron nag-feedback sa'yo, kung paano ka nagre-respond, mas madali for you to regulate yung mga, yung response mo, and of course, yung pag-keep track mo doon sa mga promises na sinet mo for yourself. So, kumbaga, mas madali pag may kasama kang nag-travel.
Yeah. I see you. I was just thinking, like, the most meaningful projects or setbacks that eventually led to redirections for me, I always had a companion. And
Si ulit yun.
see ulit. So either
yun.
community or companion na parang perhaps if you're lacking that competence, perhaps someone else can occupy or can fill in
Yes.
that gap or role. And feel ko lang kasi pag mag-isa tayo, it's either we oversell ourselves or undersell ourselves. Pero if there's someone else there, they can cut through the noise and say, hey, masyado ka na. Parang you're either you're too hard on yourself. You can actually you can do this. Even just having someone tell you can actually do this. Parang maybe that's the little step, that tiny nudge that you need in order to actually overcome that obstacle. So,
Nalala ko tuloy yung isa sa mga principles namin sa harm reduction. Kasi I work with people who use drugs. Tapos may mga situations na babalik sila doon sa state na gumagamit ulit sila ng substance, di ba? So, yung recognition that relapse is part of the healing process is actually something that we need to recognize. So, hindi ibig sabihin na pag nag-relapse ka, bumalik ka dun sa dati mong pananaw sa mundo or nag-fail ka ulit, hindi ibig sabihin na ano yon, parang
Yeah.
failure na siya as it is. Actually, pwede natin gamiting anchor point yon so that we can assess ano ba yung mga coping mechanisms ko na hindi nag-work. Ano yung mga kailangan kong support na hindi ko nakuha during those moments. So, yung pagkatuto from the failure is something that we also need to, alam mo yan, parang take advantage of. Pero of course, we're not romanticizing naman yung concept ng failure.
Especially on drugs and
diba?
relapse. Yeah, but I love that it's so grounded on science, that it can be applied to everyone who's experiencing any form of hardship, that it's not a linear thing. It's not I don't know what to do, I figured it out. Sometimes you go to I don't know, okay, I got this. I don't know, I'm a failure. I got this. So parang perhaps that's just the peaks and valleys of life as we are doing the travel theme, na hindi talaga, may mga baku-baku talaga yung daan.
Yes.
And sometimes you just have that, you have to acknowledge that those obstacles, those hurdles, they're just part of living.
Tsaka minsan parang nakaka-pressure kasi pag hinahanapan ka na agad ng direction. So parang we have to accept that state na minsan hindi mo alam yung sagot. Diba? Minsan parang kailangan mo pa ng more time or you need more conversations with other people. So yung paghahanap ng path, I think it's something that should be addressed by a collective, hindi lang no individual person.
Yeah. Speaking of collective, obviously we don't exist in isolation. And hindi lang naman tayo may pinagdadaanan. Madalas yung mga kaibigan natin, coworkers, the people around us are also going through hardships. So if you were to talk to a friend who was currently going through a setback, like what advice would you give to this friend? Magmuni-muni ka muna. Sino yung tao na yon na gusto mong tulungan? And like what encouragements can you give this person?
Parang ayoko kasi mag-delve dun sa idea ng toxic positivity kasi minsan parang okay, yung usual na connotation natin of supporting other people is okay, everything will be okay.
Yeah.
'Di ba? Parang pinangungunahan natin yung tao mismo. So ako I refrain from giving direct advice and giving direct na parang action points sa kanila. Kasi at the end of the day, sila rin naman yung makaka-determine kung ano ba yung best course of action.
Yes.
So we're just there to help them reflect. Ano ba yung mga alternatives? Ano ba yung perspective if they invite you to give your perspective? So let's take the cue from the people, siguro. So
and I think just because you went through something similar doesn't mean that they have to respond the way you responded, or that it will lead to a similar outcome, because we're different people and we have to go through life. Minsan kailangan talaga natin pagdaanan yung hirap para matuto. How about you, Mhey?
I think one powerful question I would ask this friend is, what support do you need? Kasi support can come in different forms. Like, paano kung gusto lang pala niya mag-vent? Paano kung gusto lang pala niya mag-rant? And then, paano naman kung gusto niya ng mas solution-driven na advice, di ba? Yung mga
framework
ganon.
talaga.
framework.
Analyst. May structure ako. Yung ganon. Pero, yun, I think that's a very powerful question eh. Kasi, alam nung tao yung sagot doon sa tanong na yun. And siya lang talaga yung makakapagbigay ng sagot doon. And that's, whatever it is, that's where I will come in. Whatever hingin niyang tulong support na, hingin niyang tulong from me, yun yung ipoprovide ko. At least hindi ako yung nag-feed ng medicine. Hindi ako yung nag-feed ng medicine na hindi naman pala prescribed para dun sa tao.
Approved.
And I love that it's support. It's not offering a solution or an answer.
No.
It's just supporting you, because ultimately you are the one in the driver's seat. You're the one who controls your life, and you're the one who'll be able to figure out a way through this setback.
Yeah, just to add to that, kasi diba in life coaching, kahit nga sa fitness your coach can't do the push-ups for you.
Yeah.
Ikaw pa rin ang gagawa nun. Kahit sabihin yun sa kanya, nasa iyo pa rin yung decision to take that action. So, yun.
Tsaka in the long term, parang yun naman yung gusto natin, di ba? Yung person can decide for themselves.
Yes.
Yeah.
Na hindi siya maging dependent on what other people think, what other people say, what other people recommend. So, tingin ko yung mere act of having that kind of setup ay rin siya, parang one way of recognizing the agency of the person.
Yeah. And speaking of fitness, I also feel like dealing with the setback, yung emotional agility mo, that quotient of yours, it's like a muscle. You have to keep practicing it. So, kailangan ng pagsubok para ma-practice mo yung... Kasi I think when you're younger, or like when you feel you're not grounded with your values and purpose, it's easy to be swayed by other people's expectations. I was once like a yes woman. Parang, okay, yun ba? Sige. And then I do it, and then I'm like lost again. So, it takes a lot of, you going through that shit in order for you to know, like, what am I capable of? How can I handle this in the future when something similar is bound to happen to me, which is most likely will happen actually. Ay, sobrang dami natin na pagkwentuhan. And it's just so nice kasi we just met each other.
Yeah.
Pero feel ko, nakita ko na yung kaluluwa niya based on those frameworks and stuff. But I think to wrap up our conversation, since unfortunately, hindi naman tayo buong gabi dito.
Yeah.
Any final words or like stories or advice that you want to give our listeners when it comes to dealing and embracing our setbacks?
Okay. Tumingin sa akin.
No.
Ako mauna.
Ladies
Ayan.
first.
Makuha ka sa tingin.
Okay, I firmly believe that we respond to things, situations, or people based on the level of awareness we are at. So it's really important that we continuously raise our awareness so that we can, because when we know more, we do better, right? And how do we then raise our awareness? Have that me time. My invitation is have that me time. Me time talaga. In the morning, before you, because the tendency is when we wake up in the morning, we get our phones, we check our emails, and everything, binibigay natin agad sa ibang tao yung oras natin. So, my invitation is for you to give that first hour or two hours sa sarili mo. Kasi when you fill up your cup first thing in the morning, overflow na lang yung ibibigay mo sa tao eh.
Iba, ipapasa ka na lang sa'yo.
Papasa. Actually, hindi mo nga ipapasa eh. Tatagas na lang siya eh. You're loving, you're giving from an overflow. And that will result to you not being burnt out. Dahil pag bigay ng bigay, nauubos yung tao. Tapos parang, wala na akong tinira sa sarili. Diba? Ganun yung nagiging drama. So why not just give some time for yourself and get to know yourself, start practicing mindfulness practices, diba? Like journaling, meditating. It really boils down to having that raised self-awareness.
Yeah.
Because that will help us in maybe be better in responding to different situations.
I love it. Huwag kang maubos.
Huwag kang maubos.
Mapuno ka muna para mag-over.
Yes.
Ako naman, magbe-build up ako dun sa point niya kanina about awareness, no? Kasi pag mas alam mo yung sarili mo, alam mo yung mga negotiables and non-negotiables mo. Ano yung mga things na ito-tolerate mo, kahit masakit, di ba? Ano yung mga things na acceptable for you? Ano yung gusto mo, di ba? Kasi I think pag malalim yung self-awareness mo, alam mo rin kung ano yung deserve mo as a person. And kasama na rin doon yung ano kaya yung mga bagay na kailangan kong i-let go. Kasi we can't actually keep on taking hold of things na hindi sustainable
yung bagahe
for us,
natin.
diba?
Let go.
So, kailangan matutunan rin natin kung kailan na tayo mag-let go. And I think walang walang framework doon sa pag-let go.
Unfortunately.
Oo, pero it's a personal thing. So, mag-root talaga siya doon sa deep self-awareness.
Yes.
And in terms of, yung responding to setbacks, sa tingin ko, nandun rin dapat yung built environment, yung iba't ibang mga foundations na magsusupport sa'yo na yung behavior mo would actually facilitate yung pag-bounce back mo. Kasi hindi naman siya pwedeng in isolation lagi na ginagawa.
I think it always goes back to community. And speaking of self-awareness, I think it doesn't have to be a revolutionary thing na eventually, oh my gosh, this is the true Ayen. It's not an eat, pray, love moment na magbabakasyon ka lang, makikilala mo na yung sarili mo. Sometimes it's just the hard, mundane, very ordinary things that you do repeatedly. So journaling, getting to know yourself, having those difficult conversations with maybe people and things you want to let go of, those are the stuff that will eventually lead you to discovering your true self. And I guess for me, the advice is, it doesn't have to be, don't rush into things.
Yes.
Like take a break. You don't have to figure out all the answers right away because no one actually knows the answers. We're all just trying to flow and figure out along the way. So having that community, having that drive to get to know yourself, that's already a great start. And hopefully, when the setbacks come along, it's really something you can learn from and grow from, rather than it being consuming you and stopping you in your way.
Yeah.
And that's it! Grabe! Heart-to-heart conversation. So thank you so much to everyone who's been listening to Tambay Vodcast. Tune in to the next episode. And thank you to Mhey and RJ for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Pwede na kumain.